So it's been a crazy week to say the least. A lot has gone on, and I believe this is creating the perfect storm to get people in precious metals. If you want to elaborate more, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, it's been really crazy, especially over the weekend where we saw the Japan stock market go down over 12%, and then all global markets around the world followed suit on Monday. We are rebounding now a bit, but it did really instill a lot of fear into the markets. The only asset that actually went up in price was the 10-year Treasury, which essentially is your safe haven asset at this point. It was interesting to see the U.S. dollar actually went down as well, even though all those stocks were coming down significantly. So that's interesting. So it looks like the U.S. dollars may no longer be your safe haven asset. Um, Now, precious metals, yeah, gold recently reached all-time highs at 2,500 US just a few days ago. So you are seeing some interest starting, but it's still really slow in the retail market on precious metals. People are still trusting their stock portfolios, but I mean, just recently we saw Warren Buffett. He now is sitting on $277 billion in cash. That's the most Berkshire Hathaway has ever sat on in cash. So they're obviously projecting something pretty major to happen in the markets, some type of event, something that will cause these markets to really crater. And obviously, they're looking to put that money back into action and back into the stock market. But right now, they're on the sidelines and they're waiting for better opportunities because we're still near all time highs in the stock market, and literally we're in a 15-year bull market for stocks. Ever since the market collapsed in 2008, stocks have been going straight up. We had a little mini correction during COVID, in the first year of COVID, but that was just a blip, and then boom, we went way past the prior all time highs from COVID. So, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of people out there that are projecting a major correction or crash. Some are projecting um, a really bad crash across the board, stocks and real estate, and people are really expecting a major recession. People are already admitting to the numbers now that we already are potentially in a recession in the US and in Canada. And most countries around the world, to be honest with you, are slowing down. And what you're seeing now is you're seeing basically everybody wanting to lower interest rates. The US Citibank came out last week and said that they're expecting the US Federal Reserve to lower rates 8 times before the end of 2025. So back down to near the 2.5%, 3% range. So that's very telling. And there was also rumors that the Fed would have to come out this week in an emergency and start lowering rates. So this is a really bad sign. I mean, obviously, some people are going to be happy about the lower rates because they're looking just at their mortgage payments, right? And they want a little bit of relief there. But the reality is these lower rates is not going to be good for the middle class. It's going to do the complete opposite. It's going to cause asset prices across the board to rise, and everything is going to become more expensive. So if they actually do pull this off, I don't think they're going to be able to lower rates that many times because I think you're going to start seeing the inflation numbers. Once they lower rates one time, you're going to start seeing the inflation numbers come up. If they lower a second time, inflation numbers will get higher. So for them to pull off 8 rate reductions to me is wishful thinking. I think it's also being said to try to stimulate the markets to make people feel a little bit better about the debt that they're in so that they're not going to be feeling the pain so much. But yeah, it's a scary time because I mean, lowering interest rates is not going to do anything other than artificially stimulate the market and just continue to distort asset prices. I mean, we're already in a housing bubble. We're already in a stock market bubble. We're already in I mean, to be honest, it's called an everything bubble. All the prices across the board in the world need to be corrected. The only assets that are not in a bubble at this point are commodities, gold and silver as well. Even though gold has reached all-time highs, you got to realize that $2,500 an ounce gold is not a big number. So it has a long way to go. And if you're looking at silver's still 45% less than its 1980
But
price.
you
If
got
you
to be
want to talk about,
optimistic, right? For gold, 2,500 all time highs. That's
well, it's exciting. Yeah. I mean, it's starting to bring some attention from the big money, right? Because that's who's really going to move the market at the end of the day is the real big money. And central banks have been buying record amounts for the last 2 years 2023 was the most amount of gold that the central banks around the world have ever purchased, and 2024 is looking to be even bigger than that. So, I mean, the big money is obviously going into real hard assets, commodities, and obviously Buffett. There's a lot of people sitting on cash as well, waiting for an opportunity um, to put it back into play when opportunity presents itself, because you could see more.
Well, let me
Yeah, go
pick your
ahead.
brain on this. So they're lowering interest rates, and you're saying that's terrible because you're going to jack up inflation, right? Things will become more unaffordable, which they already are. We're at the point, especially in Canada, more so. It's becoming unlivable. We've already discussed that. Um, you know, with a
Yeah,
200, you can't even survive on a $200,000 income, household income, right? We covered all
no.
that. But why would they do that? Why would they lower the rates? How do you get it better? Like, so do you higher rates, but then how do you borrow money that kind of slows down the economy? What's your, what?
That's okay. You have to listen. These recessions happen. You have to allow it to
Okay.
happen. All of a sudden, nobody wants to allow a recession anymore. Listen, you're supposed to have peaks and valleys. Not markets just don't go up forever. That's not how the world works. We stocks have gone up for 14 of the last 15 years. You can't. That's not normal. Housing prices have gone up in a similar fashion to levels that it's unaffordable now. I mean, you can't continue to inflate these bubbles because it's just going to make the crash that much
Right.
harder. So the biggest threat to citizens of Canada and the United States is inflation, and it's the hidden tax. It's the one. It's a slow, gradual increase in price that people don't
Mm,
really realize. But the reality is, things that you purchased a year or two ago, they're up 50, 60, 75%. And I know the Canadian government comes out and throws out these 3%, 4% numbers on inflation. But I mean, I think we all know what the real rate of inflation is. And it's much, much higher. It's over 10%. It's probably close to 20%. So by them lowering rates, the inflation is going to go even higher. So what levels are we going to get to? I mean, what levels of inflation do we have to get to before they actually take this serious? Because just last year we got to 9%, and you know what? They did take it serious and they did lower rates. But to be honest with you, they really weren't taking it serious. They were just trying to show you that they actually were trying to slow down inflation. But the reality is, they know for sure that they're going to continue down the inflation road because that's always what they do in the end. No leaders want to go through a recession while they're in charge of the government. So that nobody wants to have that big financial correction while they're under when they're the president or the prime minister of their country. So they're always going to try to keep the system going along and stocks going higher and asset prices going higher. So, I mean, the lower interest rates, the real reason is really to keep the banks solvent. I mean, the banks are the ones that are feeling the pressure of these higher interest rates more than anybody else, especially the commercial banks, because they bought these bonds at very low rates, and now the rates are higher, so they're paying a higher interest rate. So on all these assets that they purchased, so I mean, it's going to be the banks. A lot of banks in the U.S. are underwater right now because of these commercial loans that they
right.
made. They were giving these loans at really, really low rates, and now the interest rates are way higher, and they could be charging much more, but they can't just change the rates on these fixed
Right.
loans. So I mean, it's going to be. I mean, honestly, there was a report that came out recently saying that 282 banks in the U.S. Are deemed to be insolvent on the verge of bankruptcy. Those are regional banks in the United States. So I expect to see several banks go down in the coming months and into 2025. And that could really start a trickle down effect where people panic and you start seeing bank runs where people are lined up at the banks to try to get their money out. And when that happens, people really seek safe haven assets. And what that safe haven asset is, in my opinion, is gold and silver. And the main reason for that is it's in your possession. The banks aren't holding your gold and silver. And if you do have your bank holding your gold and silver, I think that is a mistake as well. I think the gold and silver needs to be in your possession. And historically, that's what happens. When we saw Silicon Valley go down 2 years ago, um, as a precious metals dealer, we had to wait. We were waiting 1 week from our wholesalers for silver and gold. within a month after that bank failure, we were waiting 4 months to get physical silver into our store. So that's how scarce the above ground silver market is. And that just shows people don't tend to buy gold and silver until there is some type of an event and they get spooked out of what their current assets. Right now, people are still not as nervous as they
Right.
need to be.
Markets
They're not
already
really
bounced back,
understanding.
right? A little bit.
Yeah, so now you know what? That's going to be a
Yeah.
forgotten event. People are going to just they're comfortable again. They're not even worried again. Banks aren't failing yet. They don't realize the extent of the level of these bank failures that can happen over the coming months and probably will happen. And when that does happen, you're going to see all asset classes really get hurt, except for alternatives, which I believe are gold, silver, and cryptocurrencies. I believe those assets in a banking crisis will actually perform very well. But any other asset, I think, will really get hurt in that
Well, you
scenario.
know what? Debating with friends and stuff like that, they always say, "Oh, don't worry, it's never for the doomsayers." They've been saying this for years. The market's going to crash, 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 and then they'll just print money and print their way out of it. But how long can you do this? How long can you print money? The
Forever.
U.S. is
The,
insane. What is the U.S. debt? Trillions, 30.
the, they just hit 35 trillion. But the scary part there is every year the interest is causing the debt to go up by $3 trillion
Yeah,
a year.
like every 90
So next
days
year,
they add another trillion.
exactly every 3 months the debt's going up $1 trillion. So I mean, this cannot. It's not
Yeah,
sustainable.
it's not. It doesn't
It's
make
not.
sense.
But they will continue to print because that's what they have to do. So we already know what their game plan is, and that's continue to print, continue to suppress interest rates, continue to devalue the dollar, and all that's going to do is cause asset prices to go up. Commodities specifically, commodities really got a lot of catching up to do with
Yeah,
traditional assets like
yeah,
stocks and
exactly.
bonds. Commodities still haven't performed. Some commodities are doing okay, but to be honest with you, commodities are still they're actually at their cheapest they've ever been in comparison to the stock market and the
Right.
bond market. So I mean, we have a lot of commodities have a lot of catching up to do, and I think that's the transition you're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years. You're going to see a big shift in people moving out of traditional asset classes like stocks and bonds and even real estate, and they're going to be moving into commodities, gold, silver, oil, agriculture, you
Yeah.
name it. That's where I believe the big money is going to enter. And you're going to see a huge commodities bull market in the next 5 to 10 years. And you're going to see traditional asset classes like stocks and bonds and real estate, just they're going to continue to be under pressure because the economy is slowing across the board. And it's not like it's just in Canada, the economy is slow. It's across the globe. I mean, it is bad out there. In the US, the unemployment numbers just came out. They're getting much, much worse. I think 4.5% was what it was. And last year we were at 3.5%. So, I mean, the trend is not good. I mean, technically speaking, you could argue that we are in a recession. They're not admitting it yet, but we're obviously, if we're not in it, we're heading into it. And it could easily, quickly lead into a depression. I mean, the fact that the pricing is as high as it is for the middle class, you can argue that we already are in a depression. People just don't realize it because their stock market's high, real estate market's high. So that's not traditionally a normal depression. But the reality is the cost of living is so high. Like back in the 50s, 60s, you used to be able to work one job and work for 4 or 5 years and be able to buy a
Right.
house with your savings. Now you got two people, you can't still can't afford a house, and you got to work 30 years to try to pay that off if nothing goes
The
wrong.
good
I
old
mean,
times,
what a difference.
1950. One household income paid for a house, car, everybody's education, weddings, just on one.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's how scary inflation is, and like I always call it a hidden tax because people don't really notice it along the way because a lot of them they feel like they're getting wealthier because their home value went up,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Their stock portfolio went up. They're like, oh, this is great. But to be honest, I mean, the people that don't own assets that went up in value at a great deal, I mean, how do you get by right now? How do you afford to take your family on a vacation? When I mean, you're looking at over $10,000 to take your family anywhere
Yeah.
nowadays. I don't think there's too many families that are even saving $10,000 at the end of a year. So I don't know. I don't know how the middle class is surviving right now with the current pricing. And now that the Federal Reserve is and the Central Bank of Canada, the Central Bank of Canada already lowered rates twice. So you already know what
Yeah,
they're going to do. And all the Canadian banks came out with their projections for 2025. They're all expecting another 5, 6 rate reductions. So I mean, because they know this is their only thing they can do to try to stimulate the economy, because every economic indicator that is out there is telling you that the economy is slowing. Unemployment's going up. Job growth is slowing. GDP is coming down. Just price inflation still going higher now. I don't know. I just don't see a lot of positives happening right now around the world, and I keep saying that because it's not just Canada and the U.S. This is a global crisis, and not just the economic crisis, but I believe a currency crisis is right around the corner, because of these U.S. banks, 282 of them insolvent. What's going to happen is you're going to have huge money printing programs to come help out these banks again. These banks will get bailed out again, and they're going to have to print trillions again. So all that's going to do is create even more inflation. So you're looking at the prices today, and you're probably like, "Wow, I can't believe how high everything." If you fast forward 5 years, your jaw is going to
yeah,
drop, and I don't think people truly understand the ramifications of what that will mean. So that's why I stress investing in assets that will go up in price in an inflationary environment, because without those assets, you can't save yourself. You can't just put money in a bank and let it sit there and think that $100,000 in your bank account in 5 years is going to save you. That 100,000 in 5 years is only going to be worth $10,000 to $20,000 in today's purchasing power. So you're losing huge amounts of purchasing power when you put money into the bank. And even stocks. I mean, what's your upside at this point? We've gone up 14 of the last 15 years. I don't really see a lot of upside in stocks. Can we make new all-time highs? Yeah, of course. But how far can we go? Maybe 20, 30% higher? Sure. But that won't save you from the 100% inflation that's going to be coming over the next few years. But what will, in my opinion, is precious metals. Because when we saw the highest levels of inflation in the 1970s, precious metals was by far the clear-cut winner. Gold went up 25 times, silver went up 40
yeah.
times. Okay, where stocks and real estate didn't do well at all. They barely went. Stocks under 100% and real estate went up 150%. Did not keep up with inflation. Both of those asset classes. So don't think your traditional asset classes are going to save you, because they're not. They're going to go down with the ship when things get ugly. If there's a banking crisis and a financial system meltdown, I
Well,
mean,
on this, Michael,
what do
I've known you
you?
for years
What's that?
on this topic, and I think we need to let people know and stress this more. You've been telling me this for years, and now I'm starting to see it on Twitter. And Ian Carroll, who does Cancel This Clothing Company, did a big video on it. Is people are they have to understand that we're not heading to a big crash. We're heading to the end of a currency, and that's what.
Kind of a
Yeah,
reserve currency, yeah,
exactly.
which is the U.S. dollar, and they've been the reserve currency for a long time
Yes.
now. And you don't keep the reserve currency
Right.
forever. And the writing's on the wall that those days are numbered, because you're starting to see the biggest countries in the world exit the US dollar for trade. They're no longer using the US dollar for trade. They're selling their US treasuries. China's selling record amounts of US treasuries. I mean, so that is really bad news for the US dollar. Russia is no longer using the US dollar for trade. I mean, I don't think, and I think you're going to see a lot of countries follow suit. Saudi Arabia is jumping on board. And then you got BRIC nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They've been talking about creating their own currency backed by commodities for quite some time. I'm not saying that's going to happen anytime soon, but that is eventually exactly what will happen. The next currency will be backed by commodities, likely gold, likely silver. I mean, it could maybe oil. You could see a basket of commodities. You may even see Bitcoin in the mix. You just had Donald Trump recently at the Bitcoin conference in Nashville really promote Bitcoin and saying that he wants to keep the Bitcoin that the US currently owns and keep it as a reserve, similar to how they use gold as a reserve to keep their dollar strong. I mean, this is really, really big news. If the US does do something like that, you're gonna see a lot of major countries around the world do the same. Because the big countries around the world haven't really got into Bitcoin yet. They're still buying gold and silver. So eventually they will be getting into Bitcoin as well. So that's why I also like Bitcoin. I think that is a new technology, a new form of currency, and a store of value that I think is not really getting enough attention right now. I know there have been some times where that's all people talk about is Bitcoin, Bitcoin, but to be honest with you, it's been pretty quiet over the last little while, and we're very close to probably. And I know it just got crushed recently, went down
Right.
20%, but I mean it's already bounced back over 10%. So I think you're going to see new all-time highs in Bitcoin later this year. I think you're going to see new all-time highs in gold. I think you're going to see silver really absolutely take off at some point because it's still super cheap. I'm always going to say silver is my favorite asset because it is so cheap historically speaking, and there's so many new use cases for silver. Like the silver price in 1980 was $50, and then it hit it again in 2011, and right now we're at $28. I mean, there's a huge disconnect. Every other asset in the world is up 15 to 20 times. Stocks, real estate, they're up 15, 20 times since 1980. Why is silver down 45%? I mean, it's one of the greatest opportunities of our generation. And I mean, the other thing about silver is all the new use cases. In 1980, there wasn't a lot of technology. Now everybody has a cell phone, everybody has a laptop, everybody has 5 TVs in their house, everybody's got 2, 3 cars in the household. That all requires silver. Silver is used in everything that requires power. Um, I mean, so solar panels specifically, they're taking up like 30 to 40% of the annual supply of silver is being used just in solar panels. And now you got electric cars where they're expecting another 90 million ounces by the end of 2025 to be used for electric cars. So, I mean, you got all these new use cases for silver. So the demand is growing significantly. Demand is growing 15 to 20% a year, but the supply is staying flat. The supply actually went down 2% last year. So, from a strict supply demand perspective, silver has, to me, is by far the most bullish asset with the most amount of upside out of any asset in the world, just because of the supply demand, because of the how cheap it is historically speaking. I mean, if you inflation adjust that 1980 price of $50, today you're looking at it should be around $300, and we're sitting at 28. So it's honestly like I think silver's going over a
The thing I
thousand
love
dollars.
about silver is the little guy can get rich now. The
I wouldn't say rich, but it
Yeah,
will
exactly.
save them.
Save them,
You
and
know,
it's a good return on money. You protect your wealth. Um,
it's an amazing
yeah,
return on money. Like if in the 1970s you would have made 40 times your money. I think that's exactly how this decade is going to play out as well in terms of the upside of silver. I think silver can go up 40, 50 times from here. So if you got 10 grand that you could somehow put into it and that goes up 40, 50 times, now you got 400, $500,000. Now that inflation, those higher prices, when you're paying double for your groceries, you're going to be able to afford it. You're not going to be like your friend who's still sitting on that 10 grand, or maybe that 10 grand was in stocks and now it's worth
yeah,
seven.
exactly.
So, I mean, to me, if you have a few $1,000s sitting around, or even a few hundred dollar cost average into this asset, buy it every week, buy it every paycheck. Just buy a little bit. You don't have to go all in, but you have to have some because the upside is so
Exactly.
big. I think it's just way too risky to not own that asset. Stocks, bonds, real estate, I don't see any upside in those assets. I love real estate long term, but you're going to have a much better opportunity in the next couple of years at some point. There is going to be a correction. Canada is so due for a housing market crash. I mean, we may not get a crash. It might just be a correction, and that's fine. But that means another 20% drop. That would be a good opportunity to buy real estate. Not right now. I mean, we're still not even in a recession. Like how bad is it going to get when we actually admit to a recession and people start getting nervous and war escalates? Like we haven't even talked about the
Right.
war yet. The war is escalating at a rapid pace right now, and it's just a matter of time before Iran attacks Israel. And when that happens, I mean, this is going to escalate in a whole other level. And when the US gets involved, I mean, this could really escalate into World War III quickly. And to be honest with you, a lot of people out there already think World War III has begun. And I mean, that's a scary proposition
What do we?
because
What does the
uh,
war entail from the economy? Like, especially a World War III. What does that future look like? Like, uh,
oh, I mean, more money printing for
yeah,
sure. Obviously, the banks are the ones that get the wealthiest during war.
right.
Um, they own a lot of these companies that are in
And
the
there's
stock
already
market that
indication of that. There was a stock, Lockheed Martin. So that stock price just shot up 23%. So if you look at the military stocks now, they're shooting up. So that's a big indicator that we may be heading to.
well, yeah. I mean, if you're going to own stocks, that's probably not a
Yeah,
bad place to
exactly.
be. Yeah, the war is really, I don't know what to say. I don't think it's going to be the war that people are expecting, your traditional wars where you're bombing each other
No.
and potential nuclear bombs. I'm not expecting that, to be honest with you. I think the new type of war in this era is going to be more of a technology war, more of a cyber war, more where they attack a banking system or an infrastructure, because that's how you can really collapse an economy in a country. Like if we had a cyber attack on the United States or Canada, I mean, that's how you can really, really hurt a country. So I
And
think you're
create
going to that
chaos
that
too, right? Exactly. Yeah.
chaos, total chaos, and again, it may even be a false flag, and then we blame it on a country that we want to go to war with. I mean, obviously, war is not usually started the way they tell you. The mainstream is usually not a great indicator of the real story behind the war. So there's a lot of reasons why countries go into war, and to be honest with you, usually before an economic reset or a financial reset, or we go to a new currency system, or even a new reserve currency, they always go to war before a financial collapse. Always throughout history, you can go to every single time they go to war right before it. So I don't think it's a coincidence that we're on at the beginning of potentially World War III at the same time where it looks like our economy is about to collapse and our financial system is about to collapse and our banking system is about to collapse. I don't think it's a coincidence that all of this is happening all at the
Right.
same time. To me, this is a huge, huge red flag. If nobody's out there taking all of these signs as a warning, and you're just going about your life and living your day to day and not making moves or preparing for this, I mean, you're going to have a really, really difficult time dealing with what's
Yeah.
coming. I mean, and even from a simple perspective of, let's just say there was a cyber attack and our power grid was down, and you don't have access to food for 2, 3, 4, 5 days. Like who's prepared for this?
People.
Not too many people, to be
Exactly.
honest. And I know they always call the people the preppers crazy. It's not crazy. You're just prepared. You trust me. I hope there's never any type of event like that. I don't want there to be one. But if there is, I'm
Yeah.
prepared. I mean, do people have generators that can back up their house? Do the people have an extra 2 months of food sitting around? Not too many people do, because the reality is, if this goes on for 4, 5, 6 days, you're going to be getting knocks on your door. You're people when people are starving, their family's starving. They're going to be desperate, and you don't want to be dealing with desperate people. It's not going to be a fun time to be around. That's why you see a lot of the wealthiest people in the world. They're moving to ranches. They're moving into these secluded areas with a
Right.
farm, solar panels, a energy sufficient house where you have a backup generators. So the real big money out there, they're preparing. They've already bought their ranch or wherever they want to escape to if this was to happen. There's a lot of rumblings that we're closer than you may expect to a cyber attack or a power grid failure. So I don't know. I mean, obviously the traditional style war, I mean, bombs and
Yeah.
nukes and yeah, that's all in play as well. And I think that will continue in the Middle East for sure. I honestly hope it never comes to North America, but I think that's pretty wishful thinking. I think if the U.S. gets engaged in this war, we could be at threat. The U.S. and Canada could be at threat of some type of cyber attack or even a direct hit, some type of a 9/11 type of an event. Um, I don't know. It could really escalate quickly. And in that scenario, I mean, asset classes like stocks, they could go down 70, 80, 90%.
Yeah.
I mean, why wouldn't they? Who's gonna hold on to those? I mean, if you're in a full-on world war, I mean, why would you want to take any risk at that point? And when you don't want to take any risk, the best asset to be in is gold and silver. And it always has been. And that's what people will flock into. War is very bullish for precious metals. Reducing interest rates, very bullish for precious metals. Money printing programs, very bullish for precious metals. Slowing a global economy, very bullish for precious metals. Every single thing that is currently happening in the world is super bullish for precious metals. So for people, and the reality is only 0.5% of people own precious metals. So you're talking about nobody.
But I don't
I
think they
mean,
want you to know about precious metals, anyways. Mainstream media never preaches it. Um,
no, financial
yeah,
advisors don't
financial
sell it.
advisors don't sell it, and it's always been there. I know you see now a big push. You got Costco selling it now. You see TD and banks advertising more for metals. Um,
Yeah, yeah, because
yeah,
the demand's
because
starting to grow. I mean, people are starting to get a little nervous, but it's usually the people that are
yeah,
awake, right? It's not the people who are watching mainstream media, watching CNN,
or
CNBC.
even Fox.
Those people aren't, they're not really nervous yet. It's the people who have been studying alternative media sources for a while and looking outside of the box and don't trust their government that are really interested in precious metals at this point. Your traditional mainstream middle class is not interested in precious
Right.
metals at all. Now, when Bitcoin really got parabolic and made big runs, yeah, you saw some people rush into Bitcoin. They didn't really understand why they were buying it. They just wanted to get
Yeah,
rich quick. And
exactly.
that's what's going to happen in gold and silver too. You're going to, when silver finally takes off and you see silver go up 100, 200%, you're going to see all the regular people come in and start buying. They don't know why they're buying it, but they're going to buy it because the price is going up. And right now the price hasn't done that amazing. So there's not a lot of appetite in the retail market for precious metals at this time. We're actually, and here's a crazy thing that's happening. We're currently buying at Can-Am, we're buying more gold and silver than we're selling to the general public, which is the first time that's ever happened since we've opened the business. And it's not just us, it's across Canada and the US. I've talked to a lot of dealers out there, and they're all buying more than they're selling. So the people out there on the streets, they're actually selling it. And the reality is they're selling it because they need the
Yeah.
money. Um, so there's not a lot of extra income or money just sitting on the sidelines waiting to invest. People are up to their eyeballs in debt right now. A credit card debt's at peak highs, and nobody's slowing down their lifestyle. I think COVID really changed people's mentality, and I think after that occurred, people are kind of like, you know what, you only live once. Let's just go. Let's just go on
Right.
vacation, and they're using their credit cards. They don't even have the funds in the bank. They're just going into debt and say, you know what, we'll figure it out later. And I'm not telling you not to do that because again, you do only live once. So I mean, there is merit in that. But if you're going to do that, you should also be borrowing to invest because that in the long run it will save you. I mean, I'm not telling people to borrow invest, but if you're going to borrow to go on vacation, you better be borrowing to invest, or you better have some investments already that can save your family if this economic system were to collapse. Because I mean, I don't see how it doesn't. I really don't. And I mean, I'm going to say best case scenario, you don't have a market collapse, but you have a currency collapse, which honestly, it's probably
I
worse
want
for
to
the
touch
middle
on the
class.
currency collapse. And now you said, is this could be a big setup for the CBDC, central bank digital currencies? Because
For
now you
sure.
see,
And that's kind of why I mentioned the
yeah,
cyber attack as well. And that's why I'm kind of leaning more that way in terms of some type of an event, because how are they going to implement these central bank digital currencies? I mean, almost every country in the world is working on their central bank digital currencies. Many of them are actually complete and they're just ready to roll these things out. Canada's been working on theirs for over 7 years now.
that's frightening. That's
So they're
very
probably,
frightening.
it is frightening. And it's on their website. Like just go to the Bank of Canada website. You're going to see all about their central bank digital currency. So this isn't conspiracy
Yeah,
theorist talk. This is reality. Central Bank of Canada will have a central bank digital currency. The United States will have a central bank digital currency, unless Trump try to fights
yeah.
that and he gets in. But in the UK, they're bringing one on. The EU, they're bringing one on. So I mean, the major countries out there will have a central bank digital currency. And I mean, how are they going to implement that unless they have some type of an event and they deem our current financial system and our current money not safe? Because you can attack it. You can attack our banking system today. Russia can shut down our entire banking system today. And what do? We have no access to money. Our money's gone. Our stocks are gone. Everything's gone. That's a huge risk. So how I see it playing out is that they're going to use this attack by Russia or China, whoever they blame it on, and now they got an excuse to bring in a central bank digital currency because those can't be hacked. Because now you're using blockchain technology. So that would be the only advantage of a central bank digital currency is that it can't be hacked. But the reality is it's still run by the government So they could take your central bank digital currency, they can freeze it, they can limit how much you can purchase in red meat, how many vacations you can go on. They can force you to spend your CBDCs within 12 months, or it's deemed worthless. I mean, there's so many things that they can do to this and tie
And
it
we've
within the
already
social
seen that in
credit
China
system.
with the social credit system, right? Where you,
Yeah, I mean, people always say if you want to see your future, just look to
yeah.
China today. That's the reality of it. It's a sad future, unfortunately, but we're not here yet. Central bank digital currencies aren't here yet, but I hope we fight back against it. I just am
And you
not
know
very
what? If you
optimistic.
believe in this, I wouldn't even say conspiracy theory now, is, these elites want more control, right? And the government wants more control. The perfect thing for them would be a cyber attack, because they could have a cyber attack for like a week or two. And then, you know what?
Hmm.
Oh, to get back on the internet, you're going to need a certain ID to get on. And that's how they're going to eliminate, because right now, let's face it, mainstream media, you got to be total lost to follow mainstream media. That's full of crap. There's only six companies that control every, like, thousands of channels. It's all
Yeah,
controlled. And now, but their viewership has plummeted, it's gone down, and everybody's gravitating to alternative news because that's where you're finding the truth, right? So,
for
and
sure.
I think with a cyber attack, that's the perfect storm to stop people from going to that alternative news where they could control all the information, right? Because that's what they want.
They've already started that. I mean, in Canada,
With
they've already
censorship,
they've already started.
like,
Exactly. That's just going to get worse and worse, and there's going to come a point we're not even going to be able to find that news
yeah,
anymore. You know what I mean? We're going to be have to be using some type of decentralized
ex-
internet, some
yeah, it's
black
going to
market.
be like I don't even, what's it called today, like the black market internet there, the dark web.
Yeah, I forget what it's called. Dark
Yeah,
web.
like
Yeah, I
we're gonna,
mean, it's probably where we have to go at
yeah,
some point. But yeah, the interesting part about the cyber attack is just look at what the World Economic Forum ran a simulation on a cyber attack against the U.S. banking
exactly,
system. They did this 2 years ago. They also ran a simulation on a pandemic, which 6 months later, the pandemic
yeah.
actually happened. So we're 2 years after this simulation on the cyber attack, and it hasn't happened yet. So I'm kind of, and you hear Klaus Schwab from the World Economic Forum talk about it all the time, how scary and how big of a threat that can be. I mean, to me, that's usually an indication or a warning that it is going to
Yeah.
happen. I mean, to me, it's more than 50-50. I'm erring more on the side of caution. I think there's a higher percentage chance that we will have some type of cyber attack. I just hope it doesn't last long. I mean, because it could get really, really ugly in a really quick period of time,
Yeah, for
and
sure.
people aren't prepared.
Yeah,
So I don't know. I don't know what to say other than for people to prepare and be ready for anything, because this is a crazy time. I mean, just look at the election right now when with Trump, Trump almost got
yeah.
killed. If that story is even true, Biden dropped out. If he's even still alive, I mean, what do you even believe anymore? So how can you believe anything that's coming out of mainstream when everything seems to be fake? And this Kamala Harris, she is a whole different breed as well. She's the biggest warmonger out there. I mean, you want to talk about somebody who could take our country, the United States, down the wrong path in a really quick period of time. It's that lady right there, and she's got a chance. I mean,
Well,
she's
if you
she's
look
got
at
it. She's
Vegas odds right now, which is a true indicator, something to
Yep,
follow,
for sure.
Kamala is right up. I think she just
It's
passed.
getting close.
She just passed Trump. I think, if I'm not mistaken, she's
I don't think so. I don't think.
no,
I don't. Not last time I checked, Trump was still the heavy
no.
favorite.
Now she's
But
minus two.
now, wow.
Let me look at my sources here. Um,
My point. They allowed Biden to win the last election, so they could easily make Kamala win this election. There's no real voting that's happening here. People
Kamala
actually believe
Harris
their
is
vote
minus
matters.
118. Trump is minus 106.
That's
And this
insane.
is this
I
is
might have,
right from Bet 360.
what I mean. Like, and just a few weeks ago, people were saying there's no way she could win. It has to be Trump. And now here we go. People actually think she's got a chance, and she does have a chance. If Biden could win 4 years ago, of
Yeah,
course Kamala
anybody
could
has
win.
a pylon win.
Kamala's gonna get
Yeah.
the women vote. She's gonna get the black vote. She's gonna have a
Well,
huge
let's
advantage.
let's be real. Like, is there even
That's
uh
that is.
Like, is there like
The
yeah,
votes don't
votes
matter.
really don't
Nobody's
matter. Come
counting it.
on. I,
No, of course, I know they do, but that's what they'll blame it on. That's
First of
you'll
all,
see one of the
Kamala
swing states.
Harris, when she ran the Democratic primary, she could even get 5% of the vote. She was like the bottom. And now all of a sudden, now she's on top of Trump, who's got probably one of the biggest fan bases I've ever seen since Obama. Um, like,
Truthfully, I don't even think we'll see an election. I think you're going to see some
hey,
major turmoil
Kamala,
just
like, come
prior to.
on, like, and we come from the world. We don't believe in any politicians, but it's extraordinary that a
No,
single American would vote for that person. Like, she is just, I don't.
hey, they voted for Biden, so I mean, I don't
I
think
know we shouldn't be surprised.
people have never even they don't even know what these politicians stand for. I mean, let's be honest, they don't do their research. They're just voting based off of if they're likable, they
Yeah,
like them, or for other reasons just to vote, or because they're Republican or they're Democratic. I mean, all ridiculous reasons. I mean, that's not why you should be voting. Like I've never voted, I never will, because I know it's a complete waste of time and the vote doesn't matter. I know people think that's
yeah,
crazy talk, but the reality is, if voting mattered, they would deem it illegal tomorrow. And your vote doesn't matter, never has and never will. They're already hand selected every single leader of every single country from the beginning of time. Nobody gets in without the globalists' approval. Like, even people used to think Trump got in and it was a mistake. They didn't want the globalists didn't want Trump in. Of course they wanted him in. Trump got in there and he did exactly what the central banks wanted. He kept interest rates at zero and he printed a lot of money. And he kept the stock
right.
market pumping. I mean, and that's what he's going to do again. He's already come out and said that. He's going to keep the markets running. He's going to keep printing money, lowering rates. This is disastrous for the middle class. This is not. You have to save the dollar first and foremost. You can't make pricing out of reach. Housing is going to be. I mean, in 10 years from now, I don't see any middle class people really owning homes anymore at that point. How are you going to be able to afford
And
your day
that's
to
probably
day?
what they
I
want,
mean,
right? Going back to the
that's exactly what they want. You will own nothing and be
exactly
happy.
right. So
That's that's what they're implying. You're going to own nothing because you're not going to be
you're
able
not
to
going to own a
afford to own.
car. It's going to be someone, like a Uber system. They're going to pick you up. No one's going to.
Sharing
Yeah, exactly, and that's kind of what they want.
even homes. You'll be living with multiple families. I mean, and
It's
again,
already starting.
that's
If you look at your neighborhoods, people are already doing that. A lot of the immigrants that come in, you got five families in one household, right? And I get it because it's very hard to make it today,
hey,
and that's how they do it, right?
you know what? Our families did that too
Yeah,
back in the day,
exactly.
right? When they came from Italy, you can't. It is what it is. You're not going to knock it. That's
That's
just the
how
reality of the
because
cost
that's
of
a
life.
way to save, right? Until
Of course, it's a great way to save. I mean, more people should be doing
yeah,
that. Move back in with your families. I mean, honestly, how can you get ahead? How can you save nowadays? Unless you're living with your parents, I think that's an amazing way.
yeah,
Stay with your parents as long
yeah.
as you can. Because honestly, these kids, you leave at 21 years old. Where are you going right now
Yeah,
with your?
but I don't think you're going to see
You,
that
you,
now. You're going to see
no.
more people living with their parents because they can't. Like, how do young people afford a house coming out of college with debt? You know what I mean?
Well, look at the average age of getting married. It went from 21 to what? We're at 33
Yeah,
now. Next is going to be 43 years, and then nobody's going to get
yeah,
married. I mean, nobody's going to have kids anymore. And again, that's their goal too. Depopulation is one of their biggest goals that they have, the globalists. And being poor is a good way to depopulate as well. Because to be honest with you, how many people do you know? I know a lot of people that are just don't have kids because they feel it's just unaffordable. I mean, they're not in a financial position
no, and
to have.
that's why you're seeing the statistics go down. People are not having kids, right? So
No,
um, that's
yeah,
part of it. Is the uh, when you're it's unlivable, it's unaffordable to you. You know what I'm saying?
and it's just gonna be,
Having
and
a kid
that's
costs
now. I'm
money,
telling you,
like, so that factors in. A
exactly.
lot of people are like discouraged too, right? Because they're like, oh, I don't know, we can't afford to have a kid, and
Well, and the reality is, it's just going to get worse and a lot worse. if they're going to lower rates 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 more times, I mean, the inflation that is going to come about because of that. And if some banks go down and they bail them out, I mean, the currency is just going to be so depleted that inflation is going to get to levels that we haven't seen since the late 70s. When you're talking when they admit to these big numbers, they may never admit to those huge numbers, to be honest with you, but we could get above 10%. We could get to 15% that the government admits. The government admitted to 9%. So imagine what the reality of inflation was. Probably 25.
Well, I can
So,
tell you just
I mean,
from
they
my
might.
household, grocery shopping for us and we're three people, was $150 a week. It is jumped like because I do like a little budget, whatever. It is jumped to
Yep.
$350 a week. Like that's
what I
a
mean.
big jump in grocery.
How do they come up with these
Yeah,
3%? No, I mean, it's everything across the board. There's not one thing I know of that's not going up. I mean, maybe TVs, certain technology products, but other than that, 95% of the stuff you're buying is going up 25% a year.
and I
And
want to touch on back to politics we were talking about, and we are called the Gold Awakening, and I believe we're in the age of awakening, and people are waking up to the truth, right? Because we've been lied to on a scale and for so many years that people's brains can't even comprehend, right? um like
sure,
this whole thing, like what you touched on, politics is it's pro wrestling, it's all theater
it's a
for
show,
show,
it's
and you're
theater.
right.
I mean, the Trump shooting, honestly, that was the perfect example of
Yeah,
WWE
I
wrestling.
did.
When they fall off
Like, okay,
they get their feet up.
he
I
gets
mean,
shot out. My like, if that were to happen, Secret Service would dive on that guy and yank him out of there so fast. And this guy had time to pause for a photo shoot with his hand up high. Like, come on, that
it's
was like,
where's their shields of bulletproof
yeah,
shields? Like, have you seen people when they've been attempted to be shot, other leaders, and you
that
have their security come around? The security comes around with
shields,
these
yeah.
huge bulletproof shields that you can't come any. We did. You had 3 young girls there that had no clue how to use a gun. I mean, it was the
And then
most
all the stuff
ridiculous
that's
scene I've ever.
coming out, they knew that the rifleman was on the building for 30 minutes.
Yeah,
It's like, come
yeah,
on. Like,
30 minutes. It was more closer to an hour, I think. I don't know. It's crazy.
but if he
I
would have
mean,
got shot, that would have been crazy because that would have created maybe a
a potential
potential
civil
civil
war for
war,
sure.
which we're on the
They
brink
didn't
on
want that
too.
yet.
And that's what they want is
They
back to
do
your
want.
point, and you hit it. And I really want to stress this and share this with information to our audience is that Republicans, liberals, those are to keep us divided. And with all these
100%.
bullshit cultural issues we're facing with transgender and race and all this stuff, and it keeps us fighting. But people got to realize that the true enemy are the central banks. And I'm sorry to say that. Until
You're so
we
right.
if we came together and put our differences aside, Republicans, liberals, independents, libertarians, and came aside and truly protested what's really going on, you got to attack the central banks. And if you want to see something done, you've been preaching that since day one. And I thought you were crazy at
Mm-hmm.
first because at first I was a big believer. Listen, I loved Trump when he came out. You had a non-career politician come, and I loved it. He was going after the establishment. I mean, everything he was saying. And then when you got in, you find out this guy hired the establishment. This guy's going to drain the swamp, and he hires the swamp. I was like, what's going
Exactly.
on?
He's no different
Yeah,
than
he
the
was
rest.
no
He's no
different.
different.
And that really opened up
He's an
my
actor,
eyes.
and he's been an actor too. I mean, he
Yeah,
had his own
exactly.
show, The Apprentice. He was a celebrity before. Like, what other real estate moguls out there in the world are celebrities? But for some reason, he was a celebrity his whole way growing up. How
Yeah.
did that happen? They made him a celebrity, and then they got him in some acting roles, and he started training as an actor. And I mean, that's really what he is. And when you saw when he got shot and he grabbed his ear and he went down to the ground, he had no blood on his hand. I mean, if you get shot, you have blood on you. And he said there was blood
There's a
everywhere.
lot
No
of
blood on your.
red flags. That whole
I'm not even going to
you can
continue down
go.
that
There's
path. But
100 red flags on that.
the reality is, it doesn't matter
Yeah.
who wins, and that's the truth. Whoever they want to win is already. They already know who the next president of the United States will be. 100%. That's not going to be a real vote. They know who's going in, and they know what their plan is. And my guess is there's a plan to collapse the financial system in the next 4 years and to have a reset. And I happen to believe that Trump is going to be the fall guy. I think Trump's going to be the guy that goes in, that everybody loves, but the financial system is going to go down with him or without him. He's not going to be able to save the day, because all he's going to do is print more money and lower rates as well. He's just going to be on the side of the central banks, and the central banks do not have our best interest in mind. The central banks have their best interest in mind, and their interest right now is to accumulate more wealth, print more money, and become more powerful. The more money they print, the more powerful they become. And they're going to start buying up everything. They're going to start buying up all of the assets. They're already buying up all the gold. Next is all the real estate. Next is all the resources in the countries. Canada is going to end up selling all of our resources to these central banks for a penny on the dollar, and Canadians are going to be screwed. That is a guarantee. And I think it's going to happen across the board in every country. The citizens of every country in the West, anyway, that I know of, are going to go down with the ship and go down, and they're going to give up their power to the central banks. And at that point, the whole world will be slaves. And that's been their goal forever. The central banks have been wanting to enslave us. And the best way to do that is to wipe out the middle class. And they are doing a really hell of a job of eliminating the middle class.
Back on that resources, Canada is one of the richest countries in resources. We should be thriving as an economy. I agree with O'Leary 100%. Canada is run by complete idiots. And I'm not just talking liberal. It was even the conservatives back then. They set us up too. But the liberals, the Trudeau government was like, they just put, they fast tracked it. Let's put it this way, of total incompetent.
Yeah, well, they sold our gold, number one. I mean,
we have zero gold reserve.
And we're one of the largest producers of gold in the world.
Yeah.
Yet we have zero.
How is that possible? That's like
reserve. How can you be that? I mean, they're telling you your future. They don't care about you. I mean, they want you broke. The federal government of Canada is bankrupt. The provincial government of Ontario is bankrupt. All your municipalities are bankrupt. I mean, this is going to be a complete disaster. And we're going to need to be bailed out by the central banks. And you think the central banks are just going to give us money without expecting something back in return? Oh, you're damn right we're going to have to pay them back. Okay, that money is going back to them, and they're going to take it from us. And they control all the armies, the central banks, not the governments. The central banks control the armies control the governments. There's no correlation here. Okay, the government is just a show for the general public, but the reality is the people in control are the central banks. They control the armies, not the governments, not Donald Trump, not Joe Biden, not Trudeau. It's the central banks, and they always have, and they always will. So they're going to take our resources. In the end, they're going to come and they're going to take our oil. They're going to take our gold. They're going to take whatever we have in the ground, and it's going to be theirs. And you're already seeing China. Well, how do you think China's getting the money to buy all these gold reserves in Canada and the U.S.? They're buying all of these mining projects. How are we selling it to China? Like, what a bad move. I mean, all China's doing printing. They're printing money and buying up everything in the world.
So is India too.
Yeah, India just bought 700 million ounces of silver, like in the last 2 years. But that's what we should be doing. Print money. Don't give it to the banks. Print money and go buy resources. Go buy mines. Go buy asset-producing rich products. Like, what do we do with our money? We just print it and use it for social programs or give it to banks. But does it ever really get to us? Did anybody put money in your bank account? And maybe it was like $700 or something stupid like that you spent in the first 3 days. That's not helping anybody. I mean, they don't have our best interest in mind, and that's the bottom line. No politician, not one ever. And if there was a politician that did have your best interest in mind, he's not winning. He will never get into any type.
Go through his head.
Well, that's your.
Was JFK the real last president of America? The real, true last president? He did
out of the group, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a lot of stories there too. I mean, again, you're still getting your media from mainstream on JFK, right? But you're right. He did publicly state he wanted to end the central banks. He wanted to end the Federal Reserve, whether he meant it or not, or it was just a show. who knows, right? I
Well,
mean, maybe it was all theater to create this illusion that this guy was going to fight the establishment, and then they killed him, and now they set the precedent. So everybody in the future knows.
and you see that with JFK, and you see that with Gaddafi, right? He wanted to start. Look at Gaddafi. He wanted to start. He wanted to get away from that.
He wanted to have a gold. He wanted to have his currency backed
Right.
by gold, and not use the U.S. dollar whatsoever. And yeah, when you go against the central banks, and you got three countries left that don't have a central bank. You got North Korea, you got Cuba, and you got Iran. And who are we mixing in
Yeah.
with right now? A war with Iran. And who were all the wars prior to? So there were 7 countries in the world without central banks. Libya was one of them. Now they have a central bank because the U.S. took out their leader. Iraq, they didn't have a central bank, but they killed Saddam Hussein. Created some huge story about that as well. But they create these lies just to be able to go and attack these countries and take out the leader. They make them these scary people. Gaddafi was actually one of the most amazing leaders of a country. Obviously, he had a lot of negatives too. I'm not going to say he was all great.
Right. But he
like,
provided free
people-
education. He provided a lot of stuff for his people.
Everything, money towards a first home, a
Right.
farm, like all these things that you could have easily succeeded in a country like Libya. And the United States said no. The only reason they're able to do that is because they didn't have a central bank. Well, they shut him down. They killed the leader, and they implemented a central bank right away. So now you got these 3 countries left. So until they can create one global currency and one central bank, they got to take these other 3 countries out and implement a central bank there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we really got into some juicy topics with all the stuff going on, and I'm sure we got lots more coming your way. So stay tuned to the Gold Awakening, guys. We're going to touch on topics where you will not find on mainstream media, and we're going to bring in some exciting new guests, and I'm really looking forward to talking more about this.
Yeah, we got an exciting 12 months coming. So
every week is getting crazier and crazier in 2024. So
it really is.
Tune in. Subscribe to the Gold Awakening. We're on all major podcast platforms, YouTube, and every other major platform. Thanks, Mike.
Everybody, good talking.